Hello everyone, welcome to Wildcat Conversations. We're so happy you're here today. Chico State graduates are known for their innovative spirit and drive to push boundaries on Earth. Many are even reaching for the stars. Today, I'm happy to introduce Lena Heffern, a 2013 Chico State mechanical engineering and physics graduate who is taking science to new heights. Lena is a scientist and engineer who builds tools that allow us to explore and study space. She's built many satellites, telescopes, and other incredible instruments that change our understanding of the universe. Now a senior mission systems engineer and applied physicist at the University of Colorado's Laboratory for Atmospheric Space Physics, Lena is proof of how far a Chico State degree can take you. Lena, thank you for joining us. So I want to go back to school age, Lena. What did you want to be when you grew up?
So originally, in third grade, I wanted to be a gymnast. And then very quickly, I realized I was too tall. And then in fifth grade, it's kind of funny because I didn't really know this, but my mom dug up this drawing of me in fifth grade, drawing myself as a nuclear scientist, which is kind of wild for a fifth grader. So I guess I kind of wanted to be that. I mean, later on in high school, I wanted to be a journalist like my dad, who's also a Chico State alumni. He ultimately ended up being an auto mechanic. But and then my last year of high school, senior year, I read this article in Popular Mechanics about miniaturized nuclear reactors. And I was in AP Environmental Science at the time in high school. So I was kind of like, oh, nuclear bridges the gap. Yeah, we need that. So I ended up wanting to do nuclear sciences.
That is fascinating for someone so young to develop that interest. Tell me about what drew you to the space field.
So that's a long story, but a lot of it is probably rooted in watching way too many episodes of Star Trek when I was a kid. So I went to Chico and I did mechanical engineering and applied physics. And that kind of led me towards the nuclear sciences path. I ended up getting my master's at University of New Mexico in nuclear engineering. And in my undergraduate summers when I was at Chico, I had an alumni who reached out to me through the physics department, and he got me my internship at Lawrence Livermore National Labs doing nuclear engineering. So after my master's degree, I kind of hooked back into the national labs, and one of the projects there was on a neutron gamma ray spectrometer. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a radiation monitoring instrument, and it was going to be used for space sciences, for a planetary science mission. So that kind of combined my passion for nuclear engineering with my little childhood watching Star Trek all the time. So it was actually a nice combination of the two together.
I'm going to be a little cheesy, but it was written in the stars, really, for you to follow this path.
Dude, actually, my wedding ring says "shoot for the moon" on it.
Oh, well,
it says "to the moon."
Okay.
And he actually proposed when SLS launched. So
wow.
Very cool.
Okay. So what makes you the most excited to come to work each day?
Well, not every day is exciting. This week's been rough, but so some days you get what are called anomalies in space sciences or in space engineering, right? In aerospace engineering. So we get these anomalies, and it's basically a nicer way of saying something went horribly wrong or something broke or something didn't pass the vibe test. And that's a literal thing. They put it on a shaker table and they shake it around to make sure it's going to survive a rocket launch. So those days are pretty rough, and you don't want to go in because you're like, oh no, it failed. It's going to be a rough week. We have to deal with the NASA project people who are going to be like, this is taxpayer money and it's not fun, and you want to do good and you want this to work. So those days are rough, but in the end, it ends up being worth it because number one, you get to send something to space, which is really cool. And that's the big picture kind of thing. And in the case of where I'm working right now, LASP, which is part of University of Colorado Boulder, a lot of the work we do is also for climate sciences and for space weather. So it's looking at particles from the sun. It's looking at hurricane monitoring, that kind of stuff. It's really worth it in the broader impact sense when you come into work and you know that what you're doing is really meaningful and it impacts a lot of people. There's also the little things, the little day-to-days, which is getting to go into the lab and seeing you've worked on something for months on the theory or the modeling side of it. And then you get to see an experiment actually work. And so you get to see all of this oh, here's theoretical physics. And now we've done an experiment And instead of just seeing like numbers on a piece of paper, now we're actually seeing an image of this thing. And it's absolutely incredible to get to do that. So it's like months and months of work, and then it's like an image of like a ring, or it's something like a blip on an oscilloscope, and it's just like really rewarding. It's very nerdy, but it's also like really rewarding to see like, oh my gosh, this works. Like science actually works.
So fruits of months of labor, right? You work so hard and you get to see the results.
Yeah, and like these projects are like short sprints in a lot of cases, or they're really long, like for like planetary science projects like Uranus and like, I don't know, Titan, Saturn, that kind of stuff. It's like decades in some cases, right? So it's like, oh, it takes a while. But when you're doing like instrument development stuff, which is what I do primarily, you get to see it in the lab at least first. And then a couple of years later, you get to see it take data on a planet. And then that's like even better.
Can you describe for us or explain how the work that you are doing affects or may impact our everyday lives here?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So a good example would be the coronagraph that I just helped develop. So we're on this, it's called a Phase A project. It's basically it's actually a lot like the mechanical engineering senior design. Now that I think of it. You go from concept, and it was actually almost the same timeline, which is really funny. You go from like a napkin drawing and like a concept design all the way through full development and like buying hardware and putting it on a board and everything. That in particular, that project is for space weather. So that'll go on the SW Next, Space Weather Next, that satellite, which will go out to one of the Earth's Lagrange points, which is like a point in space that's like, I won't go into the details. But what it's going to do is it's going to monitor what are called solar energetic particles coming from the sun. So we get, how we've gotten these auroras a lot lately. So if you go up in like northern California in like a dark night sky and you look out more recently, you're seeing these aurora right now, right? So that's because we have what's called the solar cycle, which is every 11 years, and we're basically at solar maximum right now. So the sun is super, super active. So those aurora that we're seeing are actually solar energetic particles hitting the Earth's atmosphere and causing those different colors, right? So what our spacecraft do and what these instruments do that we're building is they monitor that space weather coming from the sun, and they tell us like, okay, is there a very large solar flare happening? Is there a coronal mass ejection happening? Do we have to turn spacecraft off because those solar particles can actually affect our instruments and could potentially damage them? Right. So if you look at the Starlink satellites, I want to say like probably 2 years ago, they sent a bunch up and then there was a solar energetic particle event and like half of them ended up getting damaged. So like that's the work that we do is we monitor those solar events, and that helps with understanding, do we need to turn a satellite off and on again? Is it going to knock out a GPS system? It has to do with a lot of telecommunications. So it does really impact like our every day to day and like, can I gram this, right?
Yeah, it seems like it would be very disruptive to have an event like that. Yeah. You find time to give back. It seems like that's an important part of what you do. Why is it important for you to find volunteer opportunities and work with youth?
Well, so because I feel kind of an obligation to do it, I got to where I am because of another alumni giving back. I got to where I am because of volunteer scientists and engineers coming into my classroom when I was growing up. The only way that we're going to continue to make progress in this world is if we have stuff like outreach, right? Because unfortunately, our public education is not the best right now. So we need to supplement that in some way by having outreach and community outreach. And I think what's really important about that is kind of having role models and different like professors and stuff who you can look up to. So like for me, I learned a lot about science communication from the late Dr. David Kagan, who's from the Chico State Physics Department, as well as from one of the alumni there, Terry McAfee. So they would say standing on the shoulders of giants.
What type of barriers did you have to overcome to find your space in this field?
So I'm a woman. So that number one has been one of my biggest barriers. And I wouldn't say that I have actually found my space in this field. I'd say I'm continually fighting for it. Um, so I guess this is kind of not the best story, but I think it's important to tell it anyway. So when I was at Chico and I took the Intro to Design class for engineering, I can remember my first day of class, and I was one of two women in the classroom. And I sat front and center, and I think she was sitting towards the back, behind one of the pillars in that one corner room. And he's going over like free body diagrams and like how to do a lab notebook, like basic lab stuff. And then towards the end of class, so he's finishing up the lecture, and then the lecture ends, and he looks at me, just me, and he asks me, "Did you understand that?" And I came from a background in automotive, so yes, I very much understood that, probably, as I found out later in that semester, a little bit better than some of my classmates did. So, but yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, it was a little lesson for me. It was a bit jarring because it was one of my first experiences that really like made an impact on me. And it's important to continue fighting it, and not just for like, gender discrimination, but also like break racial barriers, all of that kind of stuff, lift up other people's voices.
I'm sure it's shaped a lot of your career and how you move in life.
It has absolutely shaped a lot of my decisions, for where I work and like decisions I made going into grad school. Absolutely.
Lena, what's one breakthrough in space exploration that you would love to see in your lifetime?
So sometimes I'll say like, solving the radiation problem for deep space exploration. And then other times I want to say probably more so is seeing more diversity in space, right? So the Artemis program is the follow-on to Apollo, which is, it's hopefully still going to happen. But the Artemis program is named after the Greek goddess, right? And it's going to be the first space mission where women get to walk on the moon, and not just women, but also women of color. So that's super exciting. And I think that's going to be a breakthrough.
It'll be one of those moments where you remember where you were at, right? It's like, I remember where I was at on this date.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Lena, how has your Chico State education helped you in your career?
So what was important to me at Chico is that we had small class sizes, right? So I got to know all of my professors. They knew my name, which was really important for me. Like you could go into these classes and you could ask questions, and the professor would actually be able to spend time with you as an individual student and actually help you on a problem, right? And there's a lot of universities where that's not possible. So what was nice about Chico is having those small class sizes and being able to really get a really good education and really learn that. And then the alumni connections, I mean, that started off my career was through an alumni, Tom Gosnell. The closeness of Chico was really important, right? And then like there would be things like a professor would host Thanksgiving at their house, right? Because there would be students who didn't have anywhere else to go. So that helped me in my career because it just helped to foster that kind of connection and that caring for other people.
I think a lot of our alums can relate to that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Before we close here, any advice you would like to give our students?
Yeah, keep going. That's probably my advice is keep going, have that community, have that closeness, move forward. And of course, live long and prosper.
I love it. Lena, it's been such a pleasure getting to talk with you and learn more about you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
Well, folks, I had a great time today, and I hope you did too. And if you're a Chico State alum and you have a great story to share, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. From all of us at Wildcat Conversations, thank you and see you again next time.